everybody. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Coco and Dalts. We're real people bringing you real reviews of all the latest streaming movies and series on Netflix, HBO Max, Amazon Prime Video, Disney Plus. I think that's it. Is there another one in there?
Maybe Apple TV.
Maybe Apple TV, yeah, if we can find something we want to watch on Apple TV.
If Ted Lasso Season 2 rolls out fastly.
Dalts was a huge fan of Season 1, so...
Huge.
So I think we're going to end up reviewing Season 2. But before we get into that, I'm not Dalts.
And I'm not Coco.
And not Coco, what are we reviewing in today's episode of the podcast?
Well, it's a glorious, glorious podcast, listener. I'm so glad you've joined us for this podcast.
Whenever you say stuff sarcastic like that, that means that people are in fact not going to listen because they're like, well, he's telling us that this is going to suck. So
I think we're on episode 132. So if anybody's listened to any podcast, they probably have picked up on the fact that I'm sarcastic.
And you don't like anything
and also,
that I make you watch.
And also that we cover things that are funny and not funny. So in the not funny category, it's a documentary that just aired on Netflix just the other day.
Dropped on Wednesday.
Today's Wednesday, as we speak. And it's called, and I have to read because it's very long, the title. It's called, This is a Robbery. Oh, no, it's more than that. This is a Robbery, the world's biggest art heist.
You could have had that on your phone instead of having to drag your computer over here.
No, actually, I don't mind it.
Okay.
And it's a story, a recreation, a 4-part documentary story, recreating and investigating what happened on the date of March 18th, 1990. And so the museum, did I name the museum?
No.
Because the museum is the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston.
Yes.
And there was huge amount of paintings, 13 valuable paintings. They say they were worth maybe $500 million.
Which is cray.
Were stolen.
Yeah.
And the documentary investigates this and tries to get to the bottom of it. And really, listener, I'm not spoiling it by saying it is not solved. So it's just like one extended unsolved mystery. And if you've listened to our podcast on the unsolved mysteries,
you know Dalts doesn't like them.
You know that I don't like unresolved things.
Well, I read an interview with the directors of this docuseries, the Barnacle Brothers, who grew up in Boston, and they were saying that they hope that this will shake some new information loose. Like maybe somebody watching this knows something and will come forward, because at this point, 31 years later, if we can't solve this thing, we're probably never going to solve it. So if this doesn't help the crime get solved, then this stuff is probably lost.
So we're being used, listener, essentially. They're trying to get their millions and millions of dollars worth of art back.
I think the gardener should reimburse me the $14.88 I spend on Netflix if I'm going to be used to help solve a crime. And
like,
they're putting up a $10 million reward for all this stolen artwork. So throw $14.88 to me to make up for my April dues.
Cut me some of that $10 million.
Yeah, totally.
You don't even have to give me $1 million. Just give me, let's call it $28 between the two of us.
Well, round it up to $15, so $30.
Oh, okay. Well, I was cutting them a deal. I was
okay.
actually being generous, 2 for 1.
They're an art museum. I don't think they need any deals cut.
Well, they are a museum, so usually museums suffer. So what did you think of this, Coco? This docu-series, this 4-part docu-series that's about an art heist.
So I was really... I had listened to a podcast several years ago about this same heist. I do not remember anything about that podcast. I don't even remember the name of it, but I do remember being completely fascinated by the story then, and I'm still completely fascinated by it. I know, contrary to what you normally say, I wish this could have been longer. I wish this could have been about 6 episodes. I think they really could have gone into more of the personalities, because it's a very twisty case.
Yes.
There are a lot of characters who are potentially involved. There's the Italian mob, there's the Irish mob, there's
the Canadian mob.
I mean, I think they did say that Canada might have been a place where the artwork could have been transported to, like the Montreal, yeah. So there were, and the security guard who was on duty, just some like stoner guy who musician who probably shouldn't have been in charge of guarding hundreds of millions of dollars of priceless artwork.
In hindsight.
Yeah, like there's some question as to whether perhaps he was involved or if he's just very unlucky.
Or just bad at his job.
Yeah, just really bad at his job. So yeah, I was very interested. I was very intrigued. I wish they could have gone into more detail. It was definitely kind of crazy keeping track of this person could have been involved. And then because of their potential involvement, this other person was involved. And then, they're drawing arrows on the map. Like the art went from Boston to Augusta, Maine, then down to Hartford, then maybe to Montreal, and then to Philly, perhaps. And it was really crazy. And some of the stories that I read about this even said like, oh yeah, the metal eagle on top of a Napoleonic flag was seen in somebody's basement in Hartford, but like they didn't go into a lot of that. Like I believe the same interview I read with the Barnacle Brothers, they said that like 90% of their research they ended up not using because they had the 4-episode constraint from Netflix. And I'm like, this is something I think you should have had more of. Like Madeline McCann, why do we need 8 episodes of that? Like you're just saying the same stuff over and over again. But for something like this that's so twisty and has so many facets and so many avenues of possibility for investigation, yeah, I wanted to see more. So I've got more thoughts, but I'll throw it to you. I don't want to just drone on for like 20 minutes.
Well, I want to respond to that because I thought it was just the right length. I thought 4 episodes was good. I agree with you. There was a lot of stuff left on the table, but it's the old adage is like always leave them wanting more. And some of these things that are out there these days is like there are no unanswered questions. Every avenue has been explored. Every possible theory has been examined. And I think that we got enough in this to get a good sense of who the characters were, who the potential villains were. A lot of it didn't make sense. A lot of it made sense. So I think it was fine. I think the editing was tight. I thought the pace was really good. I was really intrigued. I mean, we wanted to binge watch the whole thing in one night, and we couldn't do that because you had to go to bed at 8:30. And
I mean, that's every night.
But I thought it was really good. I was really interested. I was really compelled. I thought that the way the information was laid out was also good. Like sometimes you have these fabricated and really awkward situations where they're doing recreations and they're doing reenactments and things like that. And whoever's telling the story, whether it's a narrator or they let the interviews tell the story, it sometimes can vary. But I thought this was pulled together really well. I really enjoyed it. I had no idea about any of this kind of thing. I mean, we don't live all that far from Boston, relatively, and I had no idea of the depth of this story, and I had no idea that this is the world's largest art heist was in this museum in Boston. So it was really cool. It was really enlightening in a lot of ways and really informative, and I recommend.
I've never been to the Gardner. I've been to the MFA in Boston many times, but I've never been to the Gardner. I know that
I've been to Boston.
As of 5 years ago, allegedly, if you were named Isabella, you could get into the Gardner for free.
Oh, wow.
Like, I assume you had to flash a driver's license or something, but I don't know if that's still a thing anymore, given COVID and such. And
the fact that they've been the victims of the largest art heist in history.
Well, I mean, but this was 5 years ago, not 35 years ago. One thing that did stick out to me, though, and this is unfortunately a feature of, so we watch a lot of true crime documentaries, and that's all on me because I love true crime.
I like them too.
And one thing, and I know that you only hear about stuff that goes wrong. You don't hear about stuff that goes by the book and goes mostly right. But it seems like in a lot of these true crime documentaries and docuseries, we see a lot of police bungling of investigations. And let me preface this by saying I realized this was 30 years ago and things were a little different back then. DNA wasn't a thing back then, but fingerprints were a thing in the 90s.
They've been a thing for a while.
Yeah, they've been a thing my whole life. And and it didn't really seem as though the first Boston PD responders to the crime scene like dusted for prints.
Yeah.
And the guard who got tied up with duct tape, they didn't preserve that duct tape really well. And then several years later, when the FBI was like, maybe we should test the duct tape for prints, the duct tape had gone missing, which is suspicious. But I'm like, it seems like in a lot of these true crime documentaries, police just drop the ball spectacularly. And I'm like, what are we paying tax money for if these people can't do their jobs?
Well, and also the FBI in this case too. The FBI blew some opportunities. And I agree. I mean,
like I don't pay Massachusetts state tax, but I pay federal income tax, and that goes to, support the FBI. And I don't know. It just, we don't need to get into a tangent on policing and police reform, but I'm like, maybe we ought to reconsider the way that we do things if all we ever see is true crime documentaries about cops not being able to do their jobs and like people walking off with $500 million worth of art scot-free. Well,
I mean, I think you hit it at the top though, that a lot has changed since then, and they know a lot more than they did now. Like, I thought it was pretty hilarious when you're seeing people walk in and out of the crime scene, and they don't have gloves on, and they're cops, and they're like looking over and laughing, and they got bags of stuff.
Somebody scotch taped like a piece of printer paper with a handwritten "The museum is closed today" note onto the front door that people are still going in and out of and putting their fingerprints on the door handle, and there's no police tape roping off the scene or anything. So
yeah, people are going up and trying the door. Putting their palm prints on the door handle.
Totally.
Is it open? Is it open? And then like peeking in the window and putting their palm print on the window.
Totally.
Meanwhile, the criminals are like, yeah.
This is why the bad guys get away with stuff.
This is why the bad guys win.
Right, totally.
It's not because of corruption. It's because of pure incompetence.
Right.
So a couple of criticisms that I had, minor criticisms. In the reenactment, there's two cops sitting in the car, and they're the guys that they're dressed as cops. Maybe they broke into the place and stole the stuff. In the criminal documents, the crime documents in court and everything like that, they were saying that it was a Dodge Charger. Not a Dodge Charger. It was a Toyota something or other. Number two, the soundtrack music was abysmal.
And it didn't bother me at all.
Yeah, it didn't bother you.
I'm not a music person like you are.
Yeah, and so like in one moment it was like symphony music, another moment it was like a guy playing a triangle, and then
I definitely don't remember that.
And then there was like a guy playing cowbell. Like it was kind of all over the place with the background music, and it was really distracting to me.
So Christopher Walken,
right,
stole the artwork.
He was the music director on this.
Right.
He's like, I need my cowbell. I don't even know if that was a good Christopher Walken, but anyway. So those are really minor criticisms, obviously, because I thought this was a very interesting, compelling, and gripping docuseries.
I appreciate the fact that the Barnacle Brothers actually interviewed the secretary of the IRA.
Right.
Because there was some speculation that, there's a large Irish American community in Boston, and in 1990 when this art heist happened, there wasn't the peace agreement, between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland and the United Kingdom. Like there wasn't, the troubles were still ongoing at that point. So there was speculation that this artwork had been stolen to be like collateral for arms to fund the IRA. And so the Barnacle Brothers actually interviewed the secretary of like Sinn Féin or something, and he was not appreciative of the fact that like even the IRA has standards, right?
Yeah, he's like, what are we going to do with paintings? We're fighting a war and we need guns. What are we going to do with paintings?
Yeah, he did not appreciate like the IRA being roped into.
He was great. See, that's what I liked about this docu-series too, is there's all sorts of great characters in it. Like the what was the guy's name? Murphy, the really famous criminal guy in Boston who was accused of doing all this stuff, and he was a singer and everything like that. And then he was potentially connected with the IRA. You're looking at me funny, but he's like the main guy that they think did it, but he actually happened to be in jail.
Oh, Miles Connor.
Yeah, and famous criminal guy in Boston
who already knocked off like a few museums, including the MFA,
and stolen paintings and stuff like that. And he was great too. Like they talked to him sitting there in his white T-shirt in his backyard
with like a semi, like like an actual like
Like a trailer.
18-wheeler like
Yeah.
sitting behind him. You know?
Like, and all the characters they had in this are just great. I mean, this is what makes a great docu-series is you got to have the people telling the stories. And so, like the one suspect and his wife was really great. And the guy who had the funny Beatles haircut, like he was suspected of being involved with this. And his, like I said, his wife is a great character. So there's all sorts of, if you're going to have the people tell the story, they've got to be really interesting in themselves. It can't just be like a researcher or a lawyer or somebody like that sitting back there going, well, this is what happened.
Well, I did like, so there is a shady character in Hartford who, just the one.
The Hartford Mafia.
Right, who cops really homed in on. They thought that he could have the artwork, and he himself was not interviewed, but his criminal defense attorney was, and I liked that guy.
Mm-hmm.
That guy wasn't just a standard, that's covered by attorney-client privilege.
Right,
That guy added some color. He was like, oh, I got the call that my client was on his deathbed. I think I was on the golf course, you know?
Yeah. I that's what I like about some of these documentaries is that how they get people to spill this stuff. Mm-hmm. Like the best guys to talk to are the lawyers because they know a lot of the inside scoop. Mm-hmm. And the lawyers in a lot of these have been pretty good. I've been surprised at how much they've been willing to divulge about their clients and divulge about the situation, because you don't want somebody sitting there, like you said, saying, well, I can't really talk about that. It's like, well, that doesn't really help at all.
Right.
It doesn't help advance the story at all.
Well,
So I think...
Yeah, I'm glad the filmmakers just wasted 30 seconds on you not saying anything instead of,
There are very few of those wasted kind of moments in a documentary like this. And I mean, some of the documentaries we've seen, there have been scenes where it's like, why did we even have that interview in there? Mm-hmm. It's like the equivalent to dumping your notebook when you're a reporter. Just because you talk to somebody, it doesn't mean you have to include it in the story, right? So do you want to talk about what your letter grade is?
Yes.
What is your letter grade, Coco?
I would give it like a solid B to B plus.
Yeah.
Even though I thought it could have been longer, which is not a thing we normally say, especially not after watching the Snyder Cut.
Oh, my bum is still numb.
I was just talking to my chiropractor about the Snyder Cut this morning. Believe it or not, we were talking about a shirtless Superman. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to know that conversation. I thought maybe when you were talking to your chiropractor, it's like, why are you not? Why is your back all messed up? I was like, well, I watched the Snyder Cut. That's why. That's why I'm here.
You need to adjust my ass too while you're at it. It's not just my back is tight. Like, oh, my ass.
All the way down, man. Oh, man. 4 hours on the couch.
Yeah, my psoas. So, so yeah, I'd give it a solid B to B plus. It was really, really interesting, really gripping. The recreations, there were a lot of recreations, but they didn't feel superfluous.
Oh.
Take a shot, people who take shots when we use big words.
Right.
So yeah, I wish there were more, which is always a good sign. So what about you? What 2 stolen Rembrandts up?
No, I'm not doing that anymore. I would probably give it a 7 out of 10.
Wow.
Yeah, I really liked it. I mean, again, with this kind of thing, I always look at it, it's like, would I watch it again? And I don't think I would watch it again because I wouldn't be surprised.
Because it's 4 hours long.
It's 4 hours, but it's also like some things you'd watch again because they're entertaining and you miss something along the way. But I think I got most of it this time. Having said that, though, I still give it a high grade because it was very informative, very well done. And the craziness, like you mentioned, is like it's connecting to this dot and this dot over here and this dot over here. And yet they were saying, oh, Boston is such a small town and the crime families are kind of small town and they all know each other kind of thing. But man, oh man, it was just amazing. And I think Boston, like somewhere, somebody's got a Rembrandt hanging up in their basement and in their man cave.
Right, totally. And then grandpa's going to die and the family's going to be like, oh, this is worthless. You probably got this on art.com,
Right. And then put it out in the garage sale or the tag sale or whatever they call it in Boston. And
I remember reading several years ago that another art heist happened in somewhere in Europe, and one of the perps was in Eastern Europe, like Bulgaria or Romania, and he was not as savvy as these crooks, so the cops were closing in on him, and his mom didn't want him to get in trouble, so she burned the artwork.
Oh.
So Monet's and stuff are just cinders now, and I really pray to God that didn't happen with this stuff, that it wasn't too hot and it was disposed of, because this is stuff that should be on display for the public to appreciate. Like, the world needs more beauty, and
Man, oh man.
you know,
You're getting this deep into the podcast. I mean,
and
if you're still listening, listener, good on you, because you just got that.
and it's late at night too.
Right.
So this is when the deep thoughts come out, when
And
I'm
there's-
like pondering my place in the universe.
And there's no glass of wine in front of you?
no,
or anything
I haven't
like
had anything. I did eat a whole sleeve of Thin Mints today though, so I'm coming down off the sugar high.
that? A sleeve of Thin Mints.
I did.
Is that like a gaggle of geese?
And then we had burgers and fries for dinner, listeners.
Oh.
So my calories are just, I'm done for the weekend.
Don't remind me.
So anyway, so thieves, if you're still out there, if this stuff is still intact, please keep it intact. We need this stuff to see the light of day again.
Do the right thing.
Right, and for the world to appreciate great art.
I couldn't agree more.
Wow.
Appreciate
all
art.
right, on that note.
Yeah, I think we should go out on that note.
Yeah, totally. That's a high note.
So thanks for joining us, listener. We appreciate it. We know you have a choice, and we appreciate you choosing us for another episode of the podcast. I'm not Coco.
And I'm not Dalts.